Ever wondered what Great Depression survivors ate? These meals were made from few ingredients. These 20 dishes helped people through tough times. Start with a Depression-era stew. This was no fancy beef stew. It was a throw everything in the pot dish. We're talking potatoes, carrots, onions, and possibly barley. The meat, if you had any, great. Otherwise, no problem. In the early 1900s, American hobos made mulligan stew, or hobo stew, in camps. Hobo jungles housed homeless men during the Great Depression. The jungle would have a large campfire and a pot where each person would put a portion of their food to make a shared dish that was hopefully more flavorful and varied. Even though it was mostly broth, it felt like a meal. Try making Depression-era stew when you clean out your fridge. You may discover a new comfort food. Next is the notorious garbage plate. Let me explain before you raise your eyebrows at the name. A mix of what was available. Imagine a plate full of macaroni salad, home fries, baked beans, and sausage or ground beef. Add chili, onions, mustard, and hot sauce or ketchup. It sounds good, right? Rochester's signature dish was the 1918 garbage plate. If you missed it, many restaurants serve it as Rochester plate, trash plate, or plate. This meal was a staple when budgets were tight and gourmet options were scarce. The kids loved it, and it had all the carbs and fats you needed to get through tough times. What's wrong with fries and macaroni? This dish exemplifies don't judge a book by its cover or name. Cold milk soup is a surprise. However, desperate times require desperate measures. Depression-era staple cold milk soup is exactly what it sounds like. This Amish dish was once a favorite. Cold milk soup was easy to make. Milk, sliced bananas, sugar, and sometimes bread or other fruits. Although it may not seem like much, this was a quick and easy way for many families to get calories and nutrients when fresh ingredients were scarce. While milk provided protein and fat, bananas added natural sweetness. This easy, no-cook meal could be thrown together in minutes and was perfect for hot summer days when turning on the stove was the last thing you wanted to do. Delicious prune pudding, right? Nothing unusual here. The hit was classic. Because they were cheap, stored well, and effective, prunes were popular during the Depression. Many 1930s celebrities ate cheaply, as did most Americans during the Great Depression. Eleanor Roosevelt served prune pudding at formal White House functions to promote frugal eating, making prunes popular. Fruit was cooked until soft, mashed, mixed with water, sugar, and flour, or cornstarch to thicken. This dessert was popular with families despite its lack of beauty. Prunes are not luxurious. Prunes are probably overlooked in the grocery store, but they saved our taste buds back in the day. Know what that requires? Add them to your next grocery cart. Meal Corno was a Depression-era kitchen miracle. The government created it from cornmeal and dried milk powder to be a cheap and nutritious substitute for more expensive foods. In the early 1930s, Flora Rose led a research team that developed Maloro, Mulatto, and Milo cereals, which were sold exclusively to the Federal Emergency Relief Administration for depression-stricken Americans. Using Maloro instead of flour and cornmeal, a family of 5 could eat for under $5 a week. The versatility of Meal Corno was its best feature. You can use it to thicken soups, make cornbread, or make porridge. Meal Corno dishes can be tasty with the right seasonings and creativity. With the rise of delicious cereals, it's no longer in our diets, but no one will judge you if you try it. Peanut butter and mayo sandwiches may make you pause. Yes, you heard right. Peanut butter and mayo sandwiches were popular before PB&J. This tastes better than it sounds. Don't frown. Peanut butter and mayonnaise were popular in the 1930s because they were cheap and available. A unique flavor combination of creamy, salty peanut butter and tangy mayo is still enjoyed by some. During the Great Depression, people ate what they could afford, and this sandwich was cheap and filling. If you're feeling adventurous, try a peanut butter and mayo sandwich. Perhaps you'll find a new vice. Let's talk about Depression-era comfort food. Bean and tomato stew. Beans were a Depression staple because they are nutritious, cheap, and versatile. You guessed it, beans and tomato broth. For more substance, add potatoes, carrots, and possibly rice. The beans added protein and fiber, and the tomato sauce added flavor. This stew can be eaten alone or with rice, bread, or mashed potatoes if you have them. Someone made baked beans into a stew after Native Americans sweetened them with maple syrup. We're not mad. It was a filling meal back then, and many American households with tight budgets still cook it. This stew may seem simple, but it can save the day when your stomach is growling and your pantry is empty. Next, tomato sauce with mashed potatoes, which seems too simple. It doesn't sound gourmet, but we're talking about a time when people were just surviving. This combination stretched scarce ingredients during the Great Depression. Tomato sauce added flavor to cheap, filling potatoes. This dish was mashed potatoes with tomato sauce. This odd combination was popular because it was cheap, easy to make, and comforting. Potatoes could be mashed, fried, or baked depending on what you had. If you want a simple but tasty meal, try tomato sauce with mashed potatoes. See if this simple dish can satisfy modern tastes. Who says apple pie requires apples? Certainly not Depression-era people. This genius mock apple pie used Ritz crackers as the crust and a sweet, sticky sugar, cinnamon, and water filling. It was a cheap dessert that satisfied the sweet tooth without expensive or rare ingredients. It was also a great way to use up stale crackers in your pantry. Despite being a pastry imposter, Ritz mock apple pie was a Depression-era favorite. It worked how? The aroma of sugar, cinnamon, butter, lemon juice, and crackers made the pie taste like apples. Mid-1800s mock apple pie. In winter, when apples were scarce and dried apple stores were gone, creative home cooks used soda crackers or stale bread. Modern Ritz crackers were created in the 1930s. Next is spaghetti, boiled carrots, and white sauce casserole, which maximized simple ingredients. Some say Eleanor Roosevelt did her best during the Great Depression. A spaghetti, boiled carrot, and white sauce casserole with milk, flour, salt, and butter was promoted by the First Lady to encourage smart homemakers. It took 25 minutes to cook spaghetti. The noodles should be mushy to go with the boiled carrots and a penny of creamy sauce. The result? A nutrient carrier. This dish was versatile and adaptable to what was available, so families loved it. It satisfied hunger without breaking the bank. The spaghetti, boiled carrots, and white sauce casserole is still a tasty potluck dish that's easy to make. It may sound odd, but peanut butter stuffed baked onion is worth trying. A whole onion is hollowed out and stuffed with peanut butter. We'll bake it until the onion is sweet and caramelized. It may seem odd, but salty, creamy peanut butter and sweet onion go well together. Combining protein and vegetables was novel in this dish. While it may not be for everyone, it was a clever way to make a filling meal from cheap ingredients. Because they were easily stored and added flavor to most dishes, onions were a household staple. One of the more bizarre Great Depression food recipes, food historians Andrew Coe and Jane Ziegelman, authors of A Square Meal, dislike it. When you ran out of everything except sugar, flour, and fruit, Vinegar Cobbler was your only option. As expected, it was one of the most famous desperation pies. American desperation pies are made with butter, sugar, eggs, flour, and any other ingredients cooks had on hand to complement them or replace out-of-season or expensive ingredients. Before refrigeration and canned pie fillings, these pies were more common during the Great Depression and World War II, when fresh fruits were scarce and vinegar was used to mimic apple and lemon tartness. A mixture of vinegar, sugar, and spices made this cobbler's filling taste like a fruit cobbler when baked. To simulate acidity, budget-conscious people use apple cider vinegar. The crust was made with flour, sugar, and butter or lard. The dish reportedly tasted like salt and vinegar chip custard, a rare dessert that tingles your roof of the mouth. Although the Great Depression had few tasty recipes, it gave the world Kraft macaroni and cheese. Kraft learned in 1937 that a St. Louis tenderoni macaroni company salesman was selling his noodles with Kraft grated cheese packets. They hired the man to promote the idea and sold it to cash-strapped Americans for 19 cents for 4 servings. Some versions of this comfort food included tuna or cooked vegetables. It was cheap and easy to feed the family and was a hit with kids and adults. As a comfort food, it remains popular. During the Depression, liver loaf was a popular way to use up cheap liver. It may not be for everyone, but it provided nutrition during tough times. One of the cheapest cuts of meat, liver was full of nutrients. It's liver meatloaf with breadcrumbs, onions, and spices. Carrots and celery will add flavor and texture. Many ate it as a main course for protein and iron. Food historians say loaves were popular during the Great Depression because they contained an ingredient and a cheap way to stretch it. Lima bean and peanut loaf was another Depression-era meatless protein option. A loaf is made from cooked lima beans, peanut butter, and breadcrumbs. The savory loaf was nutty and satisfying. It was a great meatless option for budget-conscious families. It also used up leftover beans and peanuts, preventing waste. Lima bean loaf tastes like falafel but needs lots of seasoned gravy. This dish may seem odd, But it solved a common problem: getting enough protein without breaking the bank. Who knew weeds could be eaten? In the Great Depression, dandelion greens were often served at dinner. Italian immigrant women in NYC foraged this vitamin-packed ingredient. Vitamin and mineral-rich bitter leafy greens were a nutritious addition to any meal. To offset the bitterness, people sautéed the greens with bacon or lard, garlic, and onions. They can be added to soups, stews, and salads. If you see dandelions growing in your yard, remember that they're a tasty, nutritious green that can be eaten in many ways. Just make sure they're chemical-free before eating. Gelatin was used to stretch meat and bulk up meals during the Depression, which may seem odd for a savory dish. Gelatin was cheap, innovative protein. It was in many Depression-era cookbooks. Consider corned beef luncheon salad. It contains canned corned beef, gelatin, peas, vinegar, and lemon juice. Culinary historian Jane Ziegelman was unimpressed by the dish's color, smell, texture, flavor, and mouthfeel. It was trendy back then. It may seem odd, but it was a popular leftover use. Cornstarch pudding became popular when sugar and milk were scarce. Just cornstarch, sugar, and milk cooked until thickened. This creamy pudding only required milk, sugar, cornstarch, and a pinch of salt. The quick and easy dessert could be flavored with vanilla, chocolate, or fruit extracts, depending on what you had. Cornstarch pudding was popular because it was cheap, easy, and customizable. It brought comfort and sweetness during hard times. If you want a simple, nostalgic dessert, make cornstarch pudding. Perhaps it will hit the mark. Creamed chipped beef on toast, SOS, was a Depression favorite. Chipped beef was topped with a creamy sauce and toasted. Chipped beef is thinly sliced, salted, and dried beef. Some manufacturers smoke dried beef for flavor. The dish was popular because it was cheap and used common ingredients. The white sauce was made from flour, milk, and butter, and the dried beef was long-lasting. Last but not least, we have poor man's stew, also known as Hoover stew, named after President Herbert Hoover, who was blamed for the Great Depression. This simple stew used hot dogs, macaroni, canned tomatoes, and whatever vegetables were available. It was a filling one-pot meal made with cheap ingredients. A family on a budget could eat this filling and tasty meal. Though plain, it did its job back then.